Welcome to the Teapot Reads. My name's Sam. I'm the Teapot. This is what I'm currently reading, and it's so great to see you today. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, and thank you for being here. It is a wonderfully rainy spring day. Had such a great moment of reading for like half an hour. I was sitting on my bed, I was reading Maurice, I was annotating, and my dog was laying next to me, and it was rainy, but it was still light enough that I didn't really have to turn on any lights. I could use just the natural window light. It was so good. I felt so content and just happy in that moment. But the rain has kind of gone away. I don't think it's coming back, which is good because the dog needs a walk today. But it was just a really nice moment. But we're not here today to talk about Maurice. We're here to talk about a very different book or book series. And that is the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. So I finished book 2, House of Sky and Breath, a couple weeks ago. And I have been sitting on it and ruminating on it. I do have a full vlog with all of my thoughts coming out. So if you wanted more of a review, look at that. But we'll just like TLDR it. And I enjoyed it. It was a flawed book in many ways, but I did enjoy it. And I obviously love House of Earth and Blood. I say obviously because I talk about it a lot, and it ranked pretty highly on my 50 best books of all time list. So this series is near and dear to my heart, and I know it's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and I wanted to give some of my favorite similar reads to these books. A lot of people would probably recommend fantasy romances, and while I do think that very much these are fantasy romance books, I don't read a lot of fantasy romance. That's not really a driving force for me. I've read a little bit of the genre, but it doesn't really do a lot for me. So these are really tailored recommendations. If you're not a big fantasy romance reader, but you still want to capture something similar to the Crescent City books, I also took this as an opportunity to pull off some of my favorite collector's editions of these books, because I love all of these, and I just think they're all very delightful to look at. So first of all, I would recommend the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. So we have them right here in the beautiful Illumicrate editions, or 10th anniversary editions that Illumicrate put out. So they're Daughter of Smoke and Bone, Days of Blood and Starlight, and Dreams of Gods and Monsters. These are written by Laini Taylor, whom I love. Of her series that I've read, Strange the Dreamer is definitely my favorite of the two, but I do really love and remember having such fond memories of the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. These are sort of paranormal, sort of urban fantasy. They kind of sit in the middle there, and especially book 1 really falls closer to the paranormal aspect of it, which I think... Oh, the dog just got new toys and he's brought them up. Can you hear him squeaking in the background? It kind of captures that urban fantasy feel that the Crescent City books have. That's obviously set in a fantasy city that just sort of mirrors our own, or like a future of our own. But these are set in Prague. Basically, Carew works as an assistant, as a sort of messenger for Brimstone, who grants wishes in exchange for teeth. He's a demon. They are called... what are they called? Chimera. They're called Chimera in this series. There are Chimera, and then there are the angels, which are called Seraphim, I think. Besides like that urban fantasy element that these books carry, the reason that I really love these is they evolve into this sort of master epic fantasy storytelling that you don't really get from book 1, but especially book 2, things just explode. We get introduced to a huge cast of characters. There are other worlds. There are lots of creatures out there, and it's fantastic. There's also, with the Seraphim, I think the angels in this book and the angels in the Crescent City books are very similar. The way that they're even structured as a society, very similar. You know, if you're a big fan of Hunt and his cohorts, or you want to see something similar to that or more like that, definitely pick these up. The politics in these books as well are just fantastic. There are a lot of characters that you don't realize you're getting attached to until it's almost like too late and you're like, oh my god, what's going to happen to this character? So it's really good politic-wise. very similar read angel-wise. Strongly recommend these in general, but also if you're looking to chase the military political aspect of Crescent City. There is a romance. There is a romance, and actually, I think it's the very first line. Oh, hello, you've brought me your toy. I've completely lost my train of thought. Oh, there is a romance, and it's great. It's a YA series, so it's not going to be as explicit as Crescent City is. And there's actually a couple really solid main romances, but the very first line of this series, if you've never read it, it's such a treat. The very first line is, "Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well." Speaking of angels and politics, I also recommend the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon. Angels play a major role in this. So we have the Bone Season, the Mime Order, the Song Rising, the Mask Falling, and as a little bonus, the little pamphlet on the merits of unnaturalness. I do actually want to talk about this, but first I have to explain what the series is about. It is set in a near future dystopian society. So I do think that it has a lot of that technology that also you could see mirrored in Crescent City. So I think in that way they're very alike. The first two, or I've not read the third or the fourth, so I can't say for sure, but the first two are set in a London of this near future dystopian. In this world, there are people who are clairvoyants that basically have different powers, and Paige, our protagonist, is a dream walker, I think her title is, so she can go into dreams. Voyants are dangerous. They're considered criminals just by their nature. They need to be controlled, or they need to be put into basically prisons if they can't be controlled for society. So Paige is our protagonist, and in this book she's captured and sent to one of these camps, which is set in Oxford, I believe. And there she meets an angel, Arcturus, Warden. He is like in charge of her, and things spiral from there. This is a slow burn series romance wise. I must say, if you're looking to get there is stuff in book one, but it's a slow burn romance. You're not going to have a lot of fulfillment in this, and it is a slow burn series. There are characters that are introduced in book one that you don't see in book two, and I don't know if you see them again in books 3 or 4, but they're laid out very early, and each book is also kind of set doing something different, which Samantha Shannon, the author of the books, has talked about kind of in depth about why she wants each book to be almost its own thing. It's basically, her words, epic dystopian fiction. And I'm not a big dystopian fan, but I think the epic scale really helps, and it does lean closer to a sort of epic urban dystopian, or epic urban fantasy dystopian, than just straight up dystopian because of all the voyancy. The angels in this, again, are very similar to the angels in Crescent City. There's a lot of gray morality politicking going on. There is a lot of different sectors of the society, and it doesn't just take place in London. Like, the whole world is affected by this buoyancy, and the way the world is very different from our own, will also be similar to our own. So in all those ways, definitely like Crescent City, but the amount of, not creatures, because they're not creatures, they're different types of voyants, the amount of them is massive. And something that I love in Crescent City is that it pulls from so many different mythologies and folklores and paranormal creatures. We have werewolves, we have angels, we have the fae, we have merfolk, we have all of those. And in the Bone Season series, we have different type of voyants. So just to name a few, we have, that's an obscure one, botanomancers, bibliomancers, cryomancers, crystallists, necromancers, we have dreamwalkers, we have exorcists, polyglots, whisperers, mediums of different types, we have berserkers, we have dreamwalkers, we have oracles, we have all of these things, and they're just done so well and balanced against each other. And then even outside of the different type of voyants, we have so many different organizations working within this book series that there are so many different end goals for different characters, and everyone's motivations are skewed by their ties to these different organizations and these different people, and it is just done masterfully. Something that I think Crescent City also does masterfully. So again, if you're leaning more towards that political aspect and the tension between the characters and just huge and I mean massive world building, you're going to want to check out the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon. Alright, I'm sorry about that. The camera just kind of died, so if it zoomed in a little more, a little less now, sorry. I tried to fix it, but we'll see. Anyways, not 100% sure where it cut off, but this next recommendation, it's a little spoilery for both the first Crescent City book and this book to give all of the parallels why I think they're alike. I'm not going to do that, but you do have to take my word for it just a little bit. But I would also recommend Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is another book that I absolutely love. I feel like I talk about it a lot because it's so damn good, okay? It's just so good. Legendborn is about Bree, who, after the death of her mother, ends up enrolling and attending a sort of early admissions special type course at a university, even though she's a high school student. And while she's there, she discovers a secret society and the fact that she might have powers of her own. On the surface, there really aren't a lot of similarities between this book and Crescent City. It does have a lot of characters, and it does mix mythologies and folklore and just history in a really unique and awesome way. This definitely leans more into urban fantasy. There are demons. I think that's a nice... My dog is unmaking my bed. I think that's a nice comparison, but more than anything, I see a lot of similarities between Bree and between Bryce. And their names are not the similarity. I realized just now how similar those names are. But Bree and Bryce both kind of start off the books as, I wouldn't say for Bree party girl, but definitely someone you underestimate, as does Bryce. And they both are kind of coming from these locations that no one would expect of them what is going to be accomplished by them. They're also just similar characters in the way they react to things. They're both kind of snarky, they're both very clever and quick. Not necessarily witty, I don't think that's the best way to say it, but they're just quick. And they're both driven to do everything that everyone tells them not to do. Bryce is a little more of a planner than Bree, but Bree is also in a situation that she can't really plan for. Also, there's just so many like spoiler moments later in both of these books that it would be a spoiler. But suffice it to say, Bryce and Bree both have very similar holy fuck moments in this book and in Crescent City Book 1. Okay? If you're looking for a character like Bryce, but scaled down to YA, I would check out Legendborn. Alright, this series is very different than Crescent City, but I think it just does a really great job of having characters who are always one step ahead. Not even just our protagonist, but like every character is constantly trying to be one step ahead of all of the other characters. And in that way you just get such amazing twists and turns and shocks. And you're like, I could have figured it out if I had been half as clever as these characters. And that series is the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. So we have Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star. These are obviously sci-fi books, so they're very different plot-wise, world-building-wise, character-wise than the Crescent City books are. The scale of them is very different. Still very large, but just large in a very unique and different way from the Crescent City books. And the characters are motivated by pretty much completely different things. Red Rising is a dystopian-esque. It's always advertised as a dystopian, but it's really not. It's, I think, just sci-fi and future sci-fi with, like, oppression. And it's about Darrow, who starts his life as a Red, which is the lowest caste system, and after pretty much being all but killed and assumed dead, he is given surgeries and trained to be a Gold, which is the highest caste system, and infiltrate their society and take it down from the inside. It is fantastic. Book 1's not the best. Book 2 is the best. But this series really just is full of characters I love. But characters that are just constantly surprising you. And one of the things I especially loved of House of Earth and Blood, the first one, is just how many shocks there were. Book 2 has some surprises, but Book 1 was chock full of just moments where my jaw was on the ground because I was just like, holy fuck, did that really just happen? And the Red Rising trilogy also chock full of those. So if you're looking for just an absolute amazing ride, kind of like House of Earth and Blood, check out Red Rising. And then we have two kind of honorable mentions. They're honorable mentions not really because they're dissimilar to the books, but because they're just less similar. And I feel like they're both very popular authors. I feel like these are all popular authors, but not necessarily authors that someone reading Crescent City might automatically gravitate to. But these two, I think, are just some of the finest of their genre. So first of all, we have the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher. This is quintessential urban fantasy. So if you're reading Crescent City and you really just want to dive more into urban fantasy, I really recommend this series. It can be misogynistic. I think it's more the characters are misogynist and not the writer, but it is something that you do have to kind of swallow and get past, and I get that not everybody can. It was and is hard for me sometimes when I'm reading them, but they're also just really fun books. They're not deep. There are moments, but they're really not deep books. They're just awesome, exciting adventures. And especially the further you get into the series, the more of an epic grand scale they get. But yeah, if you're looking to really just start your urban fantasy series journey, I know I'm definitely probably not the first person recommending it to you, but I would highly recommend the Dresden Files. And if you are looking for connected universe fantasy, definitely go with the Cosmere. I pulled The Final Empire, which is the first Mistborn book, because this is my favorite series that I've read of his. But you can start anywhere in the Cosmere. Most people recommend Mistborn or Stormlight Archives Book 1, which is Way of Kings. Of the two, I'd lean towards this, or even Elantris, I think, is a really great place to start if you're looking for connected universes done right. And similar to how Sarah J. Maas writes hers, you know, we get really small moments in the tail end of the Throne of Glass series, I think just kind of referenced in ACOTAR, and again, really just referenced through almost like props in Crescent City. In like book 1, we see like a novel that I think was in the ACOTAR world, and The Walking Dead, which is from Throne of Glass. So we see that, but the Cosmere, especially the earlier books, is really just this, props and nods to one another, that it's a bigger universe, but most of the characters aren't super aware of it, and it's really up to the reader. We are, excitingly, getting to the point in the Cosmere where it's getting very connected very fast, but especially with Mistborn, you really just start in that journey. So if you're looking for another huge connected universe series, Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson, great books to go for. But it's really just a nod because the characters and plots and worlds are so very different from anything Sarah J. Maas writes. I wouldn't really compare them in any other way. So those are my recommendations. Let me know what you recommend down below for people who liked Crescent City. I know these are sort of unconventional choices, and I did that on purpose. I didn't want to be like, oh, From Blood and Ash. I've only read book 1 and I wasn't super impressed by it. And Crescent City is kind of doing its own thing because as much as it is a fantasy romance, it has such an epic and larger scale than I think most fantasy romance does. Now, I can't speak definitively on the genre because I don't read a lot of the genre, but from what I have read and in the past, it just feels like it's doing everything on a bigger scale. If you liked this content and you want to see more content like it, including that upcoming review / vlog of all my thoughts for Crescent City Book 2, definitely consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. As of filming this, actually, we just hit 300 subscribers, so thank you 300 times, a million times. I just am so incredibly grateful that you are all here watching me, and just, it means the world to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are somewhere cold, I hope you're staying warm. If you're somewhere warm, I hope you're staying comfortable. And most of all, I hope you're reading a great book. I will see you guys next time. Bye!